I wasn't supposed to be home that night. I had texted my mom I'd be late, that work had kept me longer than expected, but something inside told me to swing by anyway. I didn't know why. The moment I opened the front door, the world changed. Voices carried from the kitchen, sharp and urgent. My stepfather's tone cut through the air like glass. And then I heard her, my best friend's laugh, the kind I hadn't expected to hear here, in my own home. I froze. The bag in my hand felt heavier all of a sudden. My chest tightened. This house, these walls I'd grown up in, were no longer familiar. Seconds ago, everything had felt normal. Empty rooms, the faint hum of the fridge, my cat sleeping by the window. Now it felt like I had walked into a trap. "Are you seriously going to just stand there?" My stepfather's voice snapped, closer now. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. There they were, standing together as if nothing was wrong. The look on their faces wasn't guilt, it was relief. Relief that the secret had been uncovered, and now it was my turn to realize it. I couldn't speak. My throat burned. My stomach lurched. I had trusted him, trusted them, trusted this house, and in one heartbeat, all of it shattered. The laughter, the jokes, the quiet dinners, it had been a lie. For a moment, I just watched. My stepfather smiled, a casual, careless smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. My world spun. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? My mind raced. Every memory suddenly felt like a trick. Every promise, every pat on the back, every warm word, they were all part of the illusion. I stumbled back, my bag dropping to the floor with a thud. The sound echoed, loud in the tense silence that followed. Neither of them moved to stop me. They didn't need to. Their calm, their comfort in the chaos made it worse. Why? I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. No answer, only the quiet shuffle of feet, the soft click of a chair against the floor. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but the shock had frozen me. I ran to the hallway, my room. I slammed the door behind me, sliding down against it, knees drawn up to my chest. The walls, the familiar posters and photos, felt alien. My sanctuary had been violated. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway. Betrayal isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, creeping through your chest until you can't breathe. Every sound from the kitchen made my heart jump. Their voices, so calm, so normal, they mocked me without saying a word. I thought about my mom. Would she know? Could she even believe me? My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what would I say? That the people I trusted most had built a life that excluded me from the truth? That my home, my safe place, had been stolen in moments I'd never get back? I remembered the nights I had stayed awake, thinking about how to make things right. And now, all those plans, all those hopes, they seemed useless. The quiet betrayal was louder than any shout. It demanded attention, demanded recognition. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. I couldn't let the shock consume me. I had to think. I had to act, not in anger, not in violence, but in truth. There had to be a way to reclaim this life, to confront what had happened. And then I heard it. A soft click from the kitchen. A step. They were coming. I froze again. My heart pounded. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was determination. Whatever came next, I wouldn't run. I wouldn't cower. I would face it. I would understand. And one day, they would know that the person they had underestimated was ready. I sat back against the door, every muscle tense, every thought sharp. The storm had begun. And in that moment, I promised myself one thing. The truth would be seen. The betrayal would not go unanswered. But for now, all I could do was wait. And in the silence, I realized the quietest moments often hold the loudest power. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, cutting stripes across my room. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet from the kitchen. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the images from last night. The laughter, the ease, the betrayal.
I sat on my bed and let my mind wander back to a time before the walls had felt foreign. I remembered my first birthday after my stepfather had come into our lives. Mom had baked a cake, and he had been there, smiling in that way that made me think he cared. "Happy birthday, champ," he had said, ruffling my hair. I had believed him. I had believed it all. Weeks later, he had helped me fix my bike. We had laughed as the chain slipped off, and I had felt, for the first time in years, like someone in my life truly wanted me around. He had been patient, kind, joking about how clumsy I was, how much I needed practice. Those moments had stayed with me, small lights in a house that sometimes felt cold. I thought of the late nights when Mom had fallen asleep exhausted from work. He would sit with me at the kitchen table, helping with homework, quizzing me on history questions I would have forgotten if not for him. I had trusted him. I had leaned on him, told him stories no one else had heard, and he had listened, or so I had thought. Then there were the small betrayals, moments I had ignored, told myself weren't real. The dismissive sigh when I told him about a school achievement, the curt remarks about my friends. I had brushed them off. I wanted to believe in him. I had wanted to keep that bond alive. I remembered my best friend, the one whose laugh had echoed through the kitchen the night before. We had shared everything, secrets, dreams, late-night plans. "You're like a sister to me," she had said once, and I had believed her. We had been inseparable, planning summer trips, sleepovers, and late-night talks that stretched into the morning. I had thought nothing could come between us. But as I replayed the scenes, tiny details that I had ignored began to surface. That time she had shrugged when I confided something personal, pretending not to notice. That slight hesitation, that flicker of guilt, or was it fear? At the time, I had chalked it up to distraction. Now I saw it differently. I remembered the late nights when Mom had fallen asleep exhausted from work. She had asked me if I noticed anything strange. I had nodded, unsure what she meant. "She just aren't always honest with me," she had whispered. I had comforted her, but never truly listened, not until now. The house, once a place of warmth, had carried subtle fractures I hadn't noticed, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, words carefully measured, moments of kindness tinged with something else, something I had missed in my eagerness to believe. I thought of last night again, the kitchen, the laughter, the way they had looked at each other. Relief, not guilt. Comfort, not shame. I realized how much I had lost. Trust, innocence, the simple joy of believing that people loved me for who I was. And then I remembered the drawer in the kitchen, the one Mom always told me to leave alone. It was small, old, lined with faded paper. I had never had reason to open it before. Last night, in the blur of my discovery, I had glimpsed a folder sticking out. I hadn't dared touch it. But now, with the morning calm, I needed answers. I crept to the kitchen, careful not to make a sound. My hands shook as I pulled open the drawer. Inside was a folder labeled with my name and Mom's handwriting. Heart hammering, I opened it. There were letters, old photographs, receipts, small pieces of my life I hadn't known were being tracked, documented. I frowned. Why would Mom save these? Why now? Then I found something that made my stomach twist. A photo of my best friend and my stepfather from months ago, smiling in a park. Casual, normal, yet something about it didn't fit. My chest tightened. Not a snapshot, but a meeting, a moment I hadn't been invited to, a connection I hadn't known existed. And alongside them were notes, observations, dates, small details about interactions I thought were private. Nothing malicious, not explicitly harmful, but deliberate, careful, purposeful. And in that moment, I understood that my reality had layers I hadn't seen. Betrayal wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was hidden, waiting for the right moment. And sometimes the people you trusted most had reasons, intentions, or secrets that could shift everything you believed. I sat on the kitchen floor, holding the folder, heart pounding, realizing that last night wasn't the beginning. It was a revelation. The cracks had always been there. I had just finally noticed them. And then, beneath the photographs and notes, I found something else. A message, folded carefully, written in Mom's familiar script. It read, I need you to see the truth, but not yet. Be careful, watch, learn. You'll understand everything soon. I froze. My hands trembled, my mind raced. The betrayal I had felt was real, but this hinted at something deeper, something I hadn't uncovered. For the first time, I felt not just shock, but a spark of clarity. The past wasn't gone. It had been waiting, and now I had a choice: run from it or follow it. I tucked the folder under my arm, knowing that the next step would change everything. I spent the morning sitting on my bed, the folder still open beside me. Every photograph, every note, every receipt told a story I had only begun to understand. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't numb. I felt ready. Ready to act, ready to reclaim my life, ready to see the truth through calm eyes. I thought about what had been lost: trust, innocence, simple laughter around the kitchen table. But I also realized that loss could be a tool. It could teach me patience, observation, and clarity. I didn't need to lash out. I didn't need to hurt anyone. I only needed to restore balance, to make sure that deception no longer ruled the space I called home. I started small. I watched quietly from the living room, observing the subtle ways my stepfather moved, the gestures my friend and he shared that now seemed like secret codes. The air between them was familiar, almost too comfortable. But I noticed the cracks, the hesitations, the almost imperceptible glances toward the hallway where I had spent the night before, frozen against the door. Mom moved through the house, humming softly as she tidied. She didn't know I had found the folder yet. I could see the worry in her eyes when she glanced toward my room. I understood now that she had been trying to protect me all along. I felt a rush of gratitude mixed with pain. She hadn't lied to me. She had guided me to the truth in her own careful way. I began taking notes, quietly, carefully. Not to trap anyone, not to accuse, just to understand. Every pattern, every interaction, every word that didn't add up. I realized that observing with patience was more powerful than reacting with anger. Emotional strength didn't mean confrontation at every turn. It meant thinking, planning, and letting actions speak louder than words. That afternoon, I stepped outside for a walk. The neighborhood was quiet, the sky pale with the soft gold of late afternoon. I breathed in deeply, letting the calm settle into my chest. I thought about the betrayals and the secrets. I let them sit there, acknowledged, but not allowed to control me. I realized that revenge didn't have to be loud or harmful. It could be subtle, precise, moral, smart. I returned home with renewed focus. I reviewed the photographs and notes again, this time looking for patterns I had missed. Dates, locations, small gestures, all connected. Every hidden moment they thought I hadn't noticed suddenly formed a larger picture. And in that picture, I saw the opening. The opportunity to act without malice, without chaos, and to reveal truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. That evening, the tension in the house shifted slightly. My stepfather noticed my presence more keenly, the quiet awareness in my eyes. It was subtle, an almost imperceptible pause, a glance that lingered too long. My friends seemed slightly off balance as well, moving a little faster, speaking a little softer. They didn't know what I had seen. They didn't yet know that their careful concealment had been noticed. I sat in the living room, pretending to read, but my attention was keen. Every sound, every shadow, every movement was part of the story I was building in my mind. I realized that patience could be more powerful than confrontation, that quiet understanding, paired with calm action, could set the stage for the truth to emerge on its own. And then, as I flipped through the folder one last time for the night, I found a note I hadn't seen before. It was tucked behind a photograph, a scrap of paper, edges frayed, with words I had overlooked. My stepfather's handwriting was neat, careful. It read, "Things are shifting. Watch closely. She's starting to notice." My breath caught. They had sensed a change. They were beginning to understand that something had shifted. But they didn't know how much, and they didn't know that I had chosen my path carefully. I wouldn't be reckless. I wouldn't retaliate with anger. I would guide the story to its natural conclusion, letting truth and patience do the work. The quiet resolve that had begun as a flicker now burned steadily inside me. I wasn't powerless. I had insight, observation, and focus. I had learned from the past. And soon, they would understand that the person they had underestimated was no longer blind to the truth. For now, I stayed still, watching, listening. Every small movement, every word, every glance was a clue. The moment of confrontation wasn't here yet, but the stage was set. And in the silence, I felt it clearly. The balance I sought wasn't vengeance. It was justice, emotional clarity, and the reclaiming of the home I had once thought lost.
The house was quiet that evening, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound besides the ticking clock. I had waited until Mom went to bed, leaving only the two of us in the living room. My stepfather was reading, unaware that I had prepared myself for this moment. I walked in, holding the folder loosely in my hands. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I let my presence speak first. He looked up, surprised, but only slightly. There was no panic in his eyes, just that casual calm he always carried. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady. He nodded slowly, setting the book aside. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I sat down across from him, letting my gaze meet his. "I saw the photographs," I said simply. "The notes, the receipts, the little meetings I wasn't meant to know about. I understand now." He blinked, the first crack in his composed facade. I didn't think you would notice." I leaned forward slightly. "Notice? I've seen more than you realize, and I've been thinking about trust, about honesty, about what it means to be part of a family." He shifted in his chair, suddenly aware of the weight in the room. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you in my own way." I frowned. "Protecting me? By keeping secrets? By letting me feel excluded? You made choices, and I felt them in every corner of this house. I felt them in every conversation that didn't reach me, every smile that hid something else." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was helping. I didn't know how else to handle things." The words hung in the air. He wasn't trying to defend himself aggressively. He wasn't trying to justify. He was quiet, aware that the weight of what he had seen and felt couldn't be explained away. "I understand that now. I'm not here to accuse you, but I need you to understand what it feels like to be on the other side, to feel the betrayal, even if it wasn't meant to harm." His hands twitched on the armrest. I didn't realize. I should have been more careful, more open." I nodded. That's all I needed to hear. That acknowledgement, that willingness to see it from my perspective. That's how trust begins to heal. He looked down, then back up at me. "I regret it. Every moment you had to wonder where you stood. I should have told you. I should have been honest from the start." The tension in the room softened just slightly. There was no anger from me, no shouting, just the quiet force of truth laid bare. He realized that what he had hidden hadn't gone unnoticed. That truth, once revealed, was stronger than any argument or apology. I set the folder on the table between us. These are the pieces I've been holding on to. They helped me see the patterns, the intentions, and they helped me understand that I don't need to react with anger. I just need clarity. He nodded again, slower this time. "I never wanted to make you feel small. I see now that I did, and I'm sorry for it. I truly am." I let that sink in. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about forcing guilt. It was about recognition, about creating a moment where honesty could exist even after deception. And then, almost imperceptibly, the air shifted. Something in him changed. His posture straightened, not defensively, but with awareness. He realized that the balance of this story wasn't in his hands anymore. It was shared. The family dynamic, the truth, the emotions, they were out in the open now, and that transparency carried power. "He needs time," he said quietly. "Time to make this right, the right way." I nodded. We all do, but the first step is understanding. That's where it begins. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt different, lighter yet charged with the possibility of change. I could see the subtle regret, the flicker of guilt, and a sincere desire to repair what had been broken. Then I realized something. The confrontation hadn't ended with anger or revenge. It ended with awareness, with an emotional shift that neither of us could ignore. That was the real power of truth. As I rose to leave the room, he reached for the folder, hesitated, and then nodded. "We'll figure this out," he said softly. "Yes, we will. But this time, honesty comes first." I walked back toward my room, feeling the weight in my chest ease slightly. The confrontation had begun, but it wasn't a battle. It was a turning point. And in that quiet room, with the hum of the house around us, I realized that the story was no longer just mine. It was ours, and it had finally shifted. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the next chapter would bring clarity, resolution, and the kind of understanding that couldn't be forced. It had to be earned, step by step. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the blinds, painting the room in gentle gold. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder in front of me, my hands resting lightly on the papers. My stepfather entered, carrying 2 cups of tea, placing one in front of me without a word. His eyes were calm, but serious. "I think it's time we talked," he said, voice steady. I nodded. "I want to understand. Everything. Why it happened." He took a deep breath. "It wasn't about hiding things from you. Not really. It was complicated. I didn't know how to protect you without overstepping. And your friend, she was helping me in ways I couldn't explain yet." I frowned. "Helping you? How?" He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Months ago, I noticed some things. Small problems in the family, tensions I didn't want to affect you. I wanted to fix them quietly. I didn't realize it would feel like exclusion." I looked down at the folder. So all the meetings, the notes, the secrecy, it wasn't personal. He shook his head slowly. "No. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to repair misunderstandings without burdening you. I didn't see that keeping it hidden would hurt more." I felt a mix of relief and lingering hurt. Relief that it wasn't a betrayal of malice, and hurt that my trust had been shaken so deeply. I had spent months replaying scenes, imagining motives, building quiet strategies, and now I realized the truth was simpler, human, and yet still impactful. I took a deep breath. So it wasn't a secret against me. It was an attempt at care. "Yes," he said, eyes meeting mine. "Clumsy? Yes. Mistaken? Yes. But care, nonetheless." The room felt lighter, but the weight of the last months lingered. "And your part in it," I said carefully, "and hers, they still affected me. They changed how I saw home, family, and trust. That's real, and I can't just ignore that." He nodded, acknowledging the gravity of his actions. "I know, and I regret it. Every time you doubted, every time you felt alone, I wish I had done better." I let my emotions rise, but kept them steady. I remembered the nights I cried alone, the moments I doubted the bonds I thought were unshakable. I thought of the quiet work I had done, observing, learning, growing stronger. And now I had a choice. I spoke slowly, each word measured. I could hold on to anger. I could let this change the way I treat everyone here. Or I could choose something else. Something that restores balance without hurting anyone. Something that ends the story with dignity, not resentment. He looked at me carefully, reading the weight of my words. What will you choose? I closed the folder gently. I don't know yet, but I know that revenge won't give me what I need. Forgiveness? It's tempting, but it has to be honest. It can't just erase the past. He nodded, understanding that my moral choice was not easy. It was deliberate. And in that deliberate silence, I felt the quiet power of my own strength. I had learned from betrayal, observed it, felt it, and now I could shape the outcome. He shifted slightly in his chair. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild trust, he said quietly. I'll give you the space, the transparency, whatever you need. I appreciated the words, but I knew that rebuilding would take more than promises. It would take action, consistency, and time. And yet, I also realized that the control I had feared losing in this house had never truly been lost. I had been reclaiming it, slowly, thoughtfully, through observation, patience, and emotional clarity. I looked at him, then at the folder, and finally back at him again. This doesn't end tonight, I said softly. There are still questions, still truths to uncover. But the first step has been taken, and I know now that care and intention, even when hidden, can exist alongside hurt. He nodded, letting the words settle. There was no relief in the form of instant resolution, only the weight of understanding shared between us. I rose from the table, feeling the tension in my chest ease slightly, but a lingering sense of anticipation remained. The full story had been revealed, yes. The motives were clear, the misunderstandings understood, yet the emotional resolution, the choice I would make, was still hanging in the air, waiting for me to decide how to act, how to heal, how to move forward. As I walked toward my room, the folder tucked under my arm, I felt a quiet energy building. The story was not over. The balance was still to be completed. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that the next moment, the next choice, would define not only how I saw my family, but also how they would see me. I paused at the doorway, looking back once more. The air was charged, calm, but expectant. I didn't know what the next day would bring, but I understood something essential. Moral strength, patience, and clarity were more powerful than anger. And the choice, though yet unmade, held all the weight of what had come before. And in that pause, I realized the story's final chapter was waiting, not for revenge, not for blame, but for justice of the heart.
The morning sun rose slowly, spilling light across the quiet house. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder closed but still in reach, a symbol of everything I had learned. The air felt calm but charged with possibility. Today, I would make my choice, not out of anger, not for revenge, but for clarity, balance, and my own peace. I looked toward my stepfather, who was already awake, moving quietly as he prepared breakfast. There was a tension in him, yes, but also openness. I realized that we were both holding our breath, waiting for the moment that would decide the next chapter of our family. I spoke first, my voice soft but steady. I've had time to think about the past, about the betrayals, about everything I discovered. He paused, a careful hand on the counter, and I set the folder down gently. I understand now. You didn't mean to hurt me. You were trying to protect, to manage, to care in the only way you knew how. It still hurt, but I see it for what it was. He exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. I'm glad. I didn't want to lose you. I never wanted you to feel unsafe here. I nodded. I don't want to hold grudges.
I want understanding. I want honesty. I want a family where mistakes are acknowledged, where trust can be rebuilt. There was silence for a moment, comfortable and tentative. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. I can do that. I will do that. Every day if I have to. The quiet words felt heavier than any apology could have been. They weren't forced. They weren't dramatic. They were sincere, and they were enough. I glanced at the folder one last time and realized that it had served its purpose. Knowledge had replaced uncertainty. Observation had replaced fear. Patience had replaced anger. And now I had the power to choose how the story would end. I reached for a pen and a blank sheet of paper. Slowly, I wrote a letter, not for confrontation, not for blame, but for closure. I wrote about my feelings, my observations, my hurt, and my hope. I wrote about trust, about learning, and about the decision I had made to forgive, to release the weight of the past, and to let understanding guide the future. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table in front of me. My stepfather looked at it, then at me, realization dawning in his eyes. You don't have to forgive me. You could walk away. I shook my head softly. Forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. And I choose to reclaim my home, my peace, and my place in this family. But it's not naive. It's deliberate. It's balanced. He nodded, visibly moved, and for the first time in months, the tension between us shifted completely. There was relief, yes, but also a quiet mutual respect. We had faced the truth, acknowledged it, and chosen a path forward that didn't require bitterness or resentment. Later, I stepped outside into the garden. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and blooming flowers. I held the folder in one hand, the letter left behind as a symbol, and I let the sun warm my face. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. A bird landed on the fence, small and delicate, singing a clear note that echoed across the yard. I smiled. It felt poetic, almost symbolic. Life continued, growth continued, and so did I. The pain, the betrayal, the uncertainty, all of it had led me here, not to destruction, but to quiet justice, clarity, and strength. I opened my eyes and looked back at the house. The walls that once felt foreign now felt familiar again. Not perfect, not unchanged, but alive, honest, balanced. And I understood deeply that true justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about seeing, understanding, and choosing a higher path. I took a slow step toward the door, ready to start this new chapter, ready to embrace the home I had reclaimed, not by force, but through patience, courage, and deliberate choice. And as I walked inside, the house no longer felt heavy or uncertain. It felt like home again. For the first time in a long while, I knew the quiet truth, acknowledged and faced, could heal more than any act of anger ever could. And in that calm, golden morning, I realized something else. The power of choice isn't in vengeance. It's in balance, in understanding, and in the courage to let light in. I paused at the doorway, looking at the faces around me, faces that had caused pain, but now held hope. And in that pause, I whispered softly to myself, "This is home. This is peace. This is justice, finally." The sunlight touched my hands, the garden, the walls of the house, and in that stillness, I felt it fully. Everything had shifted. Everything was right.